Welcome back to Skyward, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes of the aviation aerospace industry. I'm your host, Pilot Mercedes, and today we're going over 4 of my stories from flight training, starting with the joy of my first solo, the importance of going over regulations between the country that you're coming from to the country that you're going to, the effect of unhealthy relationships, and the importance of going over your emergency procedures in the aircraft that you're training in. Let's get started.
The captain has turned on the seatbelt light. Please take your seat and fasten your seatbelts. Thank you.
My first solo happened over 10 years ago, if you can believe it now. I was 15 years old and I'd been flying for, I think, a couple months by that point. And I didn't know if my flight instructor was going to send me solo or not. And keep in mind, I hadn't even started driving lessons yet because I was 15. You have to be 16 in Canada to start driving lessons. So I did my couple circuits with my flight instructor, and I had a possible suspicion she may send me on a solo, but I operated like she wasn't going to. But lo and behold, we landed, we taxied back to the flying club, and she gets out and tells me, "You're going for your first solo, but I'm going to tell you one thing. If you don't like your first landing, go ahead, feel free to go ahead and do another round to do a better landing." So I'm like, okay, kind of excited, really nervous, very uneasy with the comms because I was a very shy teenager. And so I did the first circuit and I landed. It was a bit bumpy. I was definitely not happy with it considering my perfectionist side. So I do another circuit and butter up that landing perfectly. I was super happy with it. Came back to the flying club to big congratulations from my flight instructor, from the head flight instructor, and my family. So that was a really wonderful moment, though the funny part was my flight instructor and my head flight instructor was watching me do the circuits, and apparently she didn't tell the head flight instructor that she had given me permission to do a second round if I didn't like my first landing. So when I took off again, I did a touch and go. He thought I was just going away with his plane. So he was like, "There's this 15-year-old flying away with one of our flight school aircraft." Uh-oh. So thankfully she was able to tell him that I wasn't going anywhere. I was just going to do another landing and come back. So that was kind of a funny moment for me. The second story is the fact that after I finished my PPL in Canada, I had a little bit of a break to figure out what my next steps are after high school. Was I going to start training for my commercial and instrument rating in Canada, or was I going to move to the States for my flight training? And I ended up choosing the States because the weather is so much better in Florida, which was my own choice, because you're not dealing with any winters. If you're in Canada right now, even as I'm recording this episode right now, we're in the middle of a snowstorm in Ontario. So obviously, no one's doing any circuits, no one's doing any training at all in this lovely blizzard weather. So that's why I ended up going down to the US. However, I did some brush up on aerodynamics and stuff from the flight training manuals that I had in Canada. I never thought to check the regulations transferring to the US. I naively, as a 17-year-old, thought they were the same. They certainly are not. That mistake cost me a lot of time going into my new flight school in the US. I ended up not only struggling with instrument ground school in the US, but also dealing with understanding the difference between Canadian regulations and US regulations and trying to retrain those pathways so that I could remember the correct ones for my check ride and not recite the Canadian ones, which would be very blatantly wrong. So thankfully, 2 students ended up helping me, and credit to them, they were amazing support in helping me catch up and identify my weak areas and prepare me for my instrument rating, which I thankfully passed on my first time round, though it was very stressful. So My advice to you, if you're changing from one country to another in the middle of your flight training, look into the regulations ahead of time to see if you can start memorizing them and getting familiar with them rather than trying to do that while you're learning new concepts. Next is the effect of unhealthy relationships, which connects to the same era as me doing my instrument rating in the US. So for context, this was both of our first relationships and we were both teenagers. So we had no idea what a true healthy relationship looked like and what to expect. We were both kind of figuring stuff along the way, and he had some unfortunate circumstances at the time as well. So I know for a fact that he is in a way better spot today, thankfully. But I'm sharing this story for the sake of education and the importance of having healthy relationships. So I went into flight training, as I explained, that I was playing catch up as well as learning new information. So I was giving a lot of my energy towards learning all these new concepts and new environment, new people, new ways of learning, and also a relationship where at that time, I thought it was a give and take relationship, and that was what I was going into. But he wasn't in a spot to give and take. I ended up pouring more into the relationship than I was receiving back. So I was giving at my flight school, giving all my studies and efforts, and also trying to take care of myself, failing in that regard if you've watched previous episodes. And getting into a relationship where I wasn't getting any support or understanding back. He wasn't in flight training either, so he had no concept of what I was going through, and he hadn't gone to university yet. So it was not a good place for either of us. When I passed my instrument check ride, that ended up also being the linchpin for me to walk away from that relationship. I learned a lot about myself and what I needed in my studies, and the fact that I didn't have the capacity to give all of myself into studying in aviation and being with another person. So I learned a lot, and it trained me for what I need in my personal relationships versus another person. So when I surrounded myself with more healthy relationships, not going into one myself, but talking family members, friends, people who encourage me, my flight training and my skill level and understanding of concepts just increased like light speed, because I wasn't draining myself in any other situations. I was just focusing on what I needed to get done. And I had people who were cheering me on and helping me where I was at to help me understand the areas I was weak in, so that I walked into each check ride with the best possible version of myself at that time. So that's a difference between unhealthy relationship from my personal experience to healthy relationships and how that affected me. I hope you can learn from that. Take it as it is. Lastly, the importance of understanding and knowing your emergency procedures in the aircraft that you're training in. At the flight school that I was at, there was something called the dead bird. And this dead bird was basically just a part of the fuselage of one of the old school aircraft that was no longer flying. It ended up being a huge, amazing free resource for a lot of us students to practice the procedures going into multi-engine training. So we would sit 2, 3, 4 of us in this dead bird and go through the procedures, critique one another, and completely have these procedures known but like the back of our hands before we even really got into the multi-engine aircraft. This saved us all a ton of time of trying to be able to recall things while flying at twice the airspeed of a single engine at the flight school. So that saved us all a lot of money, and we had a lot of fun. But the importance of this came later in my training. When I'm about to do my check ride, I had a couple lessons left, and my flight instructor and I go to Daytona Beach. We land totally fine. We have our little break and we end up preparing to fly back to our flight school. The takeoff is fine, but in the climb, we end up having an engine-driven fuel pump failure in one of the engines. Just one of them, not both. I was flying at the time, not my flight instructor, and I felt a sudden pull to one side. If you've done any multi-engine training, you've probably experienced this when you're purposely doing it, but when you're not expecting it, it's kind of shocking. But you start getting a full yaw effect because you have one engine no longer propelling you forward or reducing that thrust, and the other one is full force, so that ends up turning you involuntarily. So I start feeling that pull, and my emergency procedures kick into place right away. I don't even really think about going through all of the emotions. I just do all of them out of habit, like lightning. It shocked me in the moment, and it shocked me after the fact, even to this day. But I credit that to doing that over and over and over in the Deadbird with my fellow students and even on my own. The electric-driven fuel pump ended up kicking in when I activated it. Worked perfectly. Thankfully, we were very close to Daytona Beach. We still hadn't left the airspace yet. So we were able to turn back, land at Daytona, and problem solve what to do from there. We ended up having some mechanics come and fix it so that we could return back to our flight school in one piece. Even if I didn't react in that moment, my flight instructor would have been able to take over. He was a very skilled flight instructor. He was amazing. But I definitely credit his training and all the practice that I did with my fellow students, that I did those procedures over and over and over again, that I didn't even have to think about it. I just did it, and that saved us precious time and keeping the engines going. So I hope that you found these 4 stories helpful to you, either finding a little bit of joy, understanding the importance of due diligence and preparation in transitions, the effect of unhealthy and healthy relationships in your flight training or your university studies, whatever you're working on right now, and the importance of going through your emergency procedures to the point that they're the back of your hand. I hope you walk away with something, whether you just enjoyed this episode or if you learned something as well. I would love to hear it in the comments below. I'm going to be attaching a few free resources that I found really helpful from my training to my Patreon account. So go over there and check it out. If it's helpful for you, I am thrilled. Please let me know what you think. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. Send this to a friend who you think would really benefit from these stories. Remember to rate this podcast if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode. So fly high, dream big, and I'll see you on the next episode.